Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I felt the tears welling up, but fought to hold them back. But we have history, I protested. 3 years, Ben. All those memories, all our plans. Hey there, I'm Kathy, I thought, remembering the day Ben first kissed me behind the bleachers after football practice. The metal was cold against my back, but his Letterman jacket kept me warm. His hands trembled slightly as he cupped my face, and I could smell the fresh-cut grass lingering on his practice clothes. That was 3 years ago, a time when everything felt new and exciting. Now, at 20, I catch myself staring at my phone more than I actually look at him when we're together. Our routine has become just that, routine. Friday nights used to be filled with adventure, driving around in his beat-up Corolla, sharing fries at the 24-hour diner on 5th Street, and making out in empty parking lots. These days, we sit in silence at his parents' house, the TV droning in the background while we both scroll through our phones. Even our kisses felt mechanical, like we were just going through the motions of what we thought we should be doing. Last weekend, I met Sarah for coffee at our usual spot downtown. The cafe was buzzing with the typical Saturday morning crowd, and the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. The barista knew our orders by heart. A vanilla latte for me and an Americano for Sarah. I stirred my drink absently while telling her how Ben and I barely talked anymore, how movie nights had turned into silent scrolling sessions. Maybe you need to spice things up, Sarah suggested, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her cup. Have you ever thought about, opening up your relationship? I nearly choked on my drink. Like, seeing other people? Yeah, but ethically. You both agree to it, set boundaries. It's not cheating if everyone's honest. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. My cousin tried it with her boyfriend. She said it made them appreciate each other more. The idea planted itself in my mind and wouldn't leave. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by photos of Ben and me at proms and football games, I scrolled through articles about open relationships until my eyes hurt. It made perfect sense. We could explore and grow while still having each other as anchors. We wouldn't have to throw away 3 years of history just because we were curious about what else was out there. It took me a week to convince Ben. Every time we met, I brought it up casually, like dropping little seeds of possibility during lunch at our campus cafe, between classes in the crowded hallways, or curled up on his parents' couch. Think about it, I'd say, watching his face carefully. We're only 20. Shouldn't we experience more before settling down completely? He'd shake his head, those warm brown eyes clouding with worry, but I kept pushing, painting pictures of adventure and freedom. We'd still be us, I assured him over pizza at Mario's, our favorite joint since sophomore year. This could make us stronger. We'd know we chose each other over everyone else. Finally, last night, he agreed. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment, the streetlight casting shadows across his face. The same face I had memorized years ago, but somehow it looked different now. If this is what you really want, he said quietly, his fingers nervously drumming on the steering wheel. I leaned over and kissed him, feeling relief and excitement bubble in my chest. It'll be perfect, I promised. You'll see. Looking back now, I wonder if I saw the doubt in his eyes and simply chose to ignore it. Perhaps I was too caught up in the allure of something new to realize that I might be breaking something that didn't need fixing. Let's check the story from Ben's side. The weight of her idea pressed down on me, like an unexpected exam I hadn't studied for. I could feel the anxiety creeping in, uncertainty swirling in my stomach. We were only 20, and the thought of exploring outside our relationship felt daunting. It wasn't that I thought Kathy was wrong for wanting something different. I just didn't know if I was ready to navigate that territory. During dinner, while we picked at our food, her excitement was palpable. She painted vivid pictures of how freeing it would be, how it could strengthen us. I wanted to be supportive, but deep down, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. This was unfamiliar ground, and I feared we might lose ourselves in the process. But she was persistent, coaxing me to see things her way, pushing the envelope further each time. Finally, last night, when we sat in my car outside her apartment, I caved. If this is what you really want, I said, trying to mask my apprehension. She leaned in and kissed me, her excitement flooding the space between us. I could see it in her eyes, the thrill of the new, the unknown. Looking back, I wonder if I caught a glimpse of doubt in my own gaze, but chose to ignore it, swept up in her enthusiasm. Maybe I was too focused on keeping us together to realize that I was about to gamble on something precious that didn't really need fixing. Think about it logically, she'd insist, adopting that familiar tone she uses when trying to persuade me, the same one she had when she convinced me to sneak into that midnight horror movie back in junior year. We're too young to limit ourselves. Don't you want to know what else is out there? But the truth was, I didn't want to know. I was content with our Friday movie nights, the little quirks that made us, like how she takes her coffee, vanilla creamer, no sugar, and how she always forgets to return my hoodies. I didn't crave anything beyond that. The mere thought of her being with someone else twisted my stomach into knots. I voiced my concerns to my buddy Mike while we shot hoops in his driveway, the thud of the ball against the concrete echoing like a countdown. This was the same hoop where we practiced for tryouts in freshman year, and it was here that I first admitted to him I was falling for Kathy. Man, that's how relationships end, Mike said, missing a three-pointer. Once you open that door, you can't close it. The ball rolled into the grass, forgotten, as he launched into cautionary tales about his cousin's disastrous open relationship attempt. But all I could focus on was how Kathy's eyes sparkled with excitement when she talked about this new possibility, a brightness that hadn't been there in months when she looked at me. My parents sensed something was off. My mom asked if we'd had a fight when I barely touched my dinner for 3 nights in a row. Dad tried to offer relationship advice during our weekend car maintenance session, but how do you explain to your father that your high school sweetheart wants to date other people? Each time Kathy brought it up, my resolve chipped away a little more. It felt like watching a crack spread across a windshield. Slow at first, but then suddenly overwhelming. Her argument began to make a twisted sort of sense, or maybe I just grew weary of the fight. Last night, I finally caved in. We were parked outside her place, the same spot where I had first confessed my love for her 2 years ago. She looked at me with those big green eyes that had gotten me in trouble back in high school, the streetlight catching the tiny gold flecks shimmering in them. Okay, I said, the word feeling heavy in my mouth. If this is what you want. She smiled as if I had given her the best gift ever. But all I could think about was how different everything would be now. As I watched her walk to her door, memories of our first date at the carnival sophomore year flooded back. I remembered how nervous I had been to hold her hand on the Ferris wheel. Now, I was agreeing to let her date other guys, and that made me more anxious than any carnival ride ever could. Later that night, lying in bed, I stared at our prom picture on the nightstand. Her in that blue dress that perfectly matched my tie, both of us grinning like we had the whole world figured out. I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the beginning of the end, and I wondered if I was simply too afraid of losing her to admit it. Let's check the story Kathy's side. Dating Tom from accounting began quite simply. Coffee breaks evolved into lunch dates, and before long, we were meeting after work. He had that corporate charm, crisp shirts, a perfect haircut, and expensive cologne. At first, everything felt thrilling, like I was living in my own romance novel. No history, no expectations, just pure attraction. Our first kiss took place in the parking garage after work, and it was a world away from kissing Ben. Tom exuded confidence, his moves practiced and smooth. I felt sophisticated and worldly. When he invited me to his apartment, things escalated quickly, like a movie on fast forward. The sex was technically perfect, but afterward, as I lay in his expensive sheets, I felt an unexpected emptiness. That's when I started to miss Ben's little quirks, like the way he absent-mindedly played with my hair while we watched TV, how he remembers to order extra pickles for me, even though he hates them, and the unique sound of his laugh when he's genuinely happy. Tom never laughs like that. Everything about him feels calculated. Just last week, during dinner with Tom, I found myself checking my phone, hoping to see Ben's name pop up. The restaurant was fancy, the kind of place Ben and I would only visit for special occasions, where we joke about the tiny portions and the unpronounceable menu items. With Tom, it felt more like a business meeting with benefits. That's when I realized this experiment wasn't solving anything. Instead of feeling liberated, I felt lost. The initial thrill of something new had faded, revealing that what Ben and I had was truly special, needing only some care and attention. Yesterday, I finally summoned the courage to tell Ben I wanted to end the open relationship. I planned it meticulously, inviting him to our old spot by the lake, even donning his favorite sundress. The setting sun bathed everything in a golden hue, reminiscent of the romantic movies we used to enjoy together. I think we should go back to being exclusive, I said, my heart racing with hope. His response felt like a punch to the gut. I've just started enjoying it. I've been seeing Sarah Miller, he said quietly, and Jessica from chemistry class, and Katie from our old Spanish club. Each name hit me like a wave, crashing over me. These were girls we both knew from high school, who had watched our relationship blossom, who had congratulated us at prom. With every name, it felt like a betrayal, each familiar face twisting the knife deeper. They're not just hookups, he continued, his voice steady in a way that terrified me. I'm actually connecting with them, I sat there, watching the sunset bleed into a blood-red sky, feeling like the biggest fool in the world. While I had been playing the role of a sophisticated adult with Tom, Ben had been forging genuine connections with girls who knew our history and shared our past. The jealousy crashed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. All those nights I had imagined him home, pining for me, he had been out discovering he could be happy without me. The realization made me feel physically ill. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was meant to be waiting for my return, not thriving without me. Let's check the story from Ben's side. When Kathy first suggested opening our relationship, I never imagined I would be the one to embrace it. The initial days were tough. I spent most of my time at home, consumed by thoughts of her with other guys. Then Sarah Miller reached out to me on Instagram, asking if I wanted to grab coffee and catch up. I almost declined. Sarah had been part of our extended friend group since sophomore year, sharing all our high school memories, but something compelled me to say yes. Maybe it was loneliness, or perhaps curiosity. We met at the old diner where Kathy and I used to hang out. Sarah seemed different from my memories of her, more confident, funnier. We ended up talking for hours about everything and nothing at all. She remembered details about my life that even Kathy had forgotten. My dream of opening a classic car restoration shop, my collection of vintage vinyl records. When she kissed me in the parking lot, it felt unexpectedly right. Then Jessica from chemistry class came into the picture. We bumped into each other at the campus library, and suddenly those study sessions I once had with Kathy took on a new energy. Jessica shares my enthusiasm for those obscure sci-fi books I adore, which Kathy always found dull. Then there was Katie from Spanish Club. We reconnected at a mutual friends party, and she suggested we practice our Spanish together. Our study sessions usually end up being more in English than Spanish, but in those conversations, I've learned more about myself than I have in years. Each of these new connections has taught me something different about who I am. With Sarah, I've rediscovered my old passions. Jessica encourages me to embrace my nerdy interests without shame, while Katie listens to me in a way I had forgotten was even possible. I've started working out again, joined a local car restoration club, and picked up my guitar from the basement. The guy in the mirror looks different now, stronger, more confident. The shy boy who used to let Kathy make all the decisions is gone. When she asked to meet at the lake yesterday, wearing that sundress I used to adore, I knew what was coming. The old Ben would have jumped at the chance to return to our comfortable routine, but that's not who I am anymore. I could see the hurt in her eyes when I mentioned Sarah, Jessica, and Katie. The shock that registered when she realized I wasn't just biding my time until she came back hit me hard. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to slip back into our familiar patterns, but I've grown too much to pretend. These aren't just casual flings. They're real connections with people who appreciate me for who I am now, not who I was in high school. The freedom Kathy sought has transformed into something I never anticipated needing, but now I can't imagine living without it. Let's check Kathy's side now. I knew what I had with Ben. I always thought it would be there, waiting for me like a safety net while I explored other options. I never imagined he would be the one to outgrow me. Last night, I made one final attempt to salvage what we had. I invited him to my apartment, the place where we used to spend countless evenings dreaming about our future. I cleaned obsessively all day, arranged everything just the way he liked it, and even cooked his favorite pasta, the only recipe I ever really perfected. The familiar scent of garlic and basil filled the air, a desperate effort to recreate what we once had. When he arrived, he looked different, confident, relaxed. The nervous energy that used to radiate from him was gone. He wore a new jacket I didn't recognize, and his hair was styled in a way that made him seem more mature. Seeing him standing in my doorway, so familiar yet so changed, made my heart ache. I've been thinking, I started, my rehearsed speech suddenly feeling childish. We made a mistake with this whole open relationship thing. We could go back to how things were and make it work better this time. I'll be more present, more appreciative. We could start fresh. Ben didn't sit down when I offered. Instead, he leaned against the kitchen counter. A subtle but clear message that he wasn't planning to stay long. The pasta grew cold on the stove as he spoke. Kathy, he said, his voice gentle but firm, you were right about one thing. We didn't need to grow, but you were wrong about us needing to come back to each other. I've discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Sarah, Jessica, Katie, they're not just distractions. They've helped me understand what I want in life, what kind of relationship I need. I felt the tears welling up but forced them back. But we have history, I protested. 3 years, Ben. All those memories, all our plans. History isn't a good enough reason to go backward, he replied. You taught me that, actually. When you pushed for this open relationship, you showed me that sometimes we need to let go of what's comfortable to find what's right. The irony of my own words being turned against me hit hard. I watched as he straightened up, preparing to leave. This wasn't my Ben anymore. The boy who used to agree with everything I suggested, who would have done anything to keep me happy. This was someone new, someone I had inadvertently helped create. I'm planning on seeing Sarah exclusively now, he continued, his voice steady. It wouldn't be fair to her, or to you, to pretend I can go back. Maybe it's best we stop seeing each other completely. Give ourselves a clean break. The pasta sat untouched as he walked to the door. I wanted to run after him, to remind him of every moment we'd shared, every promise we'd made. But his straight shoulders and confident stride told me it would be useless. The boy who used to melt at my touch was gone, replaced by a man who knew exactly what he wanted. And it wasn't me. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of my failed attempt to recapture the past. The photos on my fridge mocked me, those younger versions of us smiling, blissfully unaware of how thoroughly I would destroy what we had. I took them down one by one, each memory stinging like salt in a fresh wound. The worst part isn't losing Ben. It's knowing that I orchestrated this entire disaster. I pushed for an open relationship, convinced it would solve our problems. Instead, it solved things, just not in the way I'd intended. He found his voice, his confidence, his independence, and I found myself alone, holding the remains of a relationship I dismantled with my own hands. They say be careful what you wish for. I wished for freedom, for excitement, for change. I got all three, just not the way I wanted. Now, sitting in my empty apartment with cold pasta and fallen tears, I realize some changes can't be undone. Some doors can't be closed once opened. And sometimes, the person who suggests playing with fire is the one who gets burned the worst. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.